Hey Mark, Scotty here. I just wanted to record a couple of chapters of this book to give you an idea of how it sounds. I did not know you were dyslexic until you mentioned it in your email this morning, and I thought maybe this would be an easy way for you to get a flavor of the book. You may still want to read the whole thing by yourself, but let me try a couple of selected chapters and we'll go from there and you can see if you get a good flavor. It'll either make you go, oh, that sucks, or it's going to make you say, boy, I do want to read that whole book. So here we go. The First 12 Days, subtitled on the front cover, The Anatomy of Survival by Scotty Roberts. Then there'll be the legal page, of course, and then the inner title page, then the dedication, and then there'll be a blank page that has these two sentences on it. 12, the number of tribes, of gates, of stars, the rhythm by which creation keeps time. 12 days to reckon with a lifetime and to begin again. A note to the reader. I've spent most of my life talking to an unseen audience from behind a microphone. My own small bridge on the ship of everyday chaos. By day, I'm an illustrator and writer, but for more than 2 decades, my nights belonged to the airwaves. Intrepid Radio, the Scotty Roberts Show, and a late-night after show my listeners called The Captain's Cabin. Then on Christmas night of 2024, the microphone went silent. A sudden medical crisis, the one that would eventually take my leg, also took my voice. Everything stopped. The broadcasts, the laughter, the nightly ritual of steering conversations through the dark. For months, I was confined to a single chair. The same one where I used to command the airwaves had become the place of my recuperation. Somewhere along the way, the name stuck, the captain's chair. It became both a helm and a harbor, a place to sit still and take stock while the storm raged on. Out of that silence came something different, the captain's log, short daily reflections on what it meant to keep the helm when the sea gets rough. What follows is another such log, written from that same chair, only this time the storm was my own. This is not a story about losing a leg. It's a story about what's left standing when the world you know gives way beneath you. There are no heroes here, only a man learning how to breathe through pain, to laugh in waiting rooms, to forgive, to keep trying when everything he's built begins to come apart. You won't find thunderclaps or halos in these pages. No divine pronouncements, no perfect endings, just the anatomy of survival. Bone, scar, love, faith, and the stubborn human will to rise again. If you've ever found yourself staring into the wreckage of something you loved, your health, your marriage, your hope, and wondered who you'll be on the other side of it, this is for you. Sit with me a while. We'll walk together, even if it's only in words, and even if one of us walks with one less step. Scotty Roberts. The First 12 Days by Scotty Roberts. The Prologue. On Christmas night, my wife Rainey noticed I wasn't breathing right, and she ran me to the emergency room. She later said I was breathing far too fast, my chest rising, then pausing, too long for her comfort. Then I would grow too still. The ER doc said I probably had a bad cold or maybe the flu and sent us back home. That same night, in the wee hours of the early morning, she said I called out for her in a rather panicked stupor, saying I couldn't breathe. She went and shook our 15-year-old son Flynn awake and said, "We're taking your dad back to the ER." Together they loaded me into the car and drove through the winter dark, snow whispering across the windshield. I have no memory of that ride or any events of that night. A week earlier, I'd been engaged in the normal ebb and flow of my life, sitting at my drawing table in my studio, working digital designs on my computer, planning another podcast segment, thinking about a trip I might never take. I had no idea the ground under my life was already cracking. When we arrived at the ER, Rainey made sure I was being taken care of, then left me there to run our son home and check on the other kids. In her very brief absence, we live only minutes from the hospital, the doctors intubated me and placed me on a ventilator, putting me into what they call a medically induced coma, a deep sedation meant to keep me still and unaware while the machine breathed for me. He was only meant to last the night, but it wiped my memory clean, leaving a gap that still feels like lost time. My oxygen levels were reading low on one of those fingertip sensors, the kind that reads your pulse and oxygen saturation, and on the basis of that single number, the ER staff made the call to intubate, ventilate, and transfer me by ambulance, another trip I do not recall, to a different hospital in the city. Later that day, my oxygen level was normal. In truth, I don't think they ever truly needed to ventilate me, as those fingertip sensors can sometimes be woefully inaccurate, and if they hadn't chosen to take the action they did, perhaps none of what followed might ever have happened. The next afternoon, they took me off the ventilator and removed the tubes. When they extubated me, however, something went terribly wrong. They tore up my throat, larynx, trachea, everything. I woke hoarse, unable to speak, my neck raw as if someone had scraped it with glass. For months I could barely get out a whisper. Some of you might remember those early Epic Life Radio podcast conversations when I told you, I don't know if my voice will ever come back. That wasn't a metaphor. After a few days, I was discharged from the hospital. January and February were spent half reclined, breathing through scar tissue that kept thickening in my throat, slowly closing down my airway. The doctors referred to that scar tissue as granulation. I called it slow suffocation. By March, they had to go back in with 2 separate procedures. First, a tracheal endoscopic airway dilation, blowing up the width of the trachea with a balloon, followed a few weeks later with a bronchoscopy to literally scrape the scar tissue out of my throat. The procedure went fine. The aftermath did not. To help me heal, they pumped me full of high-dose steroids. Over the next 2 to 3 days, my blood sugars exploded. 700, 800, 900. I'm still not sure how I survived that week. On the 4th morning, a Monday, I swung my legs over the edge of the bed and tried to stand and nearly hit the floor. My left leg wouldn't hold me. It felt like it had died in the night. The pain was sharp and deep, like when your foot falls asleep, but multiplied 1,000 times, radiating all the way up to my knee. I caught myself on the bed frame and sat there, trying to understand what had happened. My first thought was simple. I must have slept on it wrong. I called out to Rainey, told her something wasn't right, but still believed it would fade like any limb waking back up. It didn't. All that day I waited for the tingling to ease, for the blood to flow back, for the leg to wake. It never did. By nightfall, I began to understand this wasn't a pinched nerve or bad circulation. The steroids that had shot my blood sugars through the roof had triggered something catastrophic, accelerating whatever damage was brewing inside me, fast and brutally. In less than 3 days, everything below my knee was dying. The next day, my doctor prescribed neuropathy meds and said, let's keep an eye on it. By Thursday, I was supposed to visit a friend for bourbon and cigars on his veranda. I made it a mile from home before the pain became unbearable. I pulled over, tore off my boot and sock, and called my friend to cancel. I turned the car around and drove straight to the ER, where they ran a CT scan and sent it to the vascular surgeon at Regions Hospital in St. Paul, Minnesota. His response was immediate. Get him here by ambulance right now. That night he operated for 8 hours, starting around 8:30 in the evening and finishing near dawn. When I woke at 6:20 a.m., his hair was disheveled, his eyes hollow from the all-nighter. He told me, "We saved the leg, for now." He'd pulled out dozens of blood clots, thick as pencils. Then he said the line that still chills me: "If you made it to your friend's house last night for bourbon and cigars, you probably would not be alive this morning. Those clots would have hit your heart." The scars from that surgery once ran the length of my leg on both sides, from the bend of the knee to the ankle. They looked like riverbeds, tributaries, carved by pain and persistence. Today, most of those scars are gone, taken with the lower leg itself. It's strange to think that the proof of survival vanished with the very thing it once saved. Every time I look at what remains, I remember how close I came to being a name on a chart instead of a man still here to tell the story. For a while it looked like we'd won, but months later the tissue in my foot failed. The leg was already writing its own obituary. By April, after more consultations and dead ends, I thought I was finally healing. The leg looked good, almost whole again. But diabetes, never out of control, just quietly waiting its turn, made everything worse. Necrotic tissue started to form in my big toe. They took the toe, told me it should be fine. I told them I didn't want to lose my leg piece by piece, but they assured me things were stable, and the gangrene had not spread into the other foot bones. A few weeks later, they discovered the arteries in my foot were still closed. So they went back in with an angiogram of the arteries in my foot, and I was awake for it. I remember the surgeon saying, "You're going to feel this." And then I did. It wasn't pain so much as pressure, like my foot was being inflated from the inside out. I said, "What is that?" He told me, "That's your arteries being cleared. We're opening them up so blood can flow again in your foot." It worked. For the first time in months, blood was moving freely through my foot. But the damage had already been done. The necrotic tissue that started in my big toe had indeed spread to the others, and now because the arteries were open and I was on blood thinners to prevent new clots, I couldn't stop bleeding. For 2, maybe 3 weeks, I bled constantly, soaking my dressings every day. When they finally went back in, the surgeon told me the tissue had rotted so far that she could remove my toe bones with her fingers. They amputated the remaining toes and the front third of my foot, cleaned and sutured what was left, and hoped it would finally take. But it didn't. The bleeding never stopped and the wounds refused to close. That's when the conversation changed. They told me, "We may have to go a bit higher. The foot isn't healing. And then there won't be enough left to walk on or fit for a prosthetic." That was the breaking point. I told them, "This is exactly what I feared. You saved the leg, but now we're just cutting it off one piece at a time." Then I looked at them calm but furious and said, "If you're going to take my leg off incrementally, then go back up to the healthy tissue and take the whole thing. I don't want to go through 2 or 3 more partial amputations for another year." I didn't shout, but they heard me. That quiet, controlled kind of anger that comes from months of pain and exhaustion and medications that left me feeling drunk off my rocker and stoned at the same time. I couldn't walk a straight line or hold a cogent thought. I couldn't write. I couldn't draw. I couldn't paint. I could barely even think straight. I mused at one point over those months that this must be what dementia feels like. I told the doctors that I would rather have the leg removed than go through several more surgeries and the mental and physical complications that accompany them. The surgeons agreed. The vascular specialist met with me again a few days later and said, "You're right, it's time." I was admitted back into Regions Hospital, where they scheduled the surgery. I remember the cold antiseptic smell of the prep room, the familiar weight of resignation. 2 weeks ago, last Sunday, they wheeled me in. When I woke, the leg was gone below the knee. Relief didn't come. Emptiness did. It was at that moment, though I didn't fully grasp it yet, that I unwittingly joined a new tribe, a community bound not by choice but by loss. I had become disabled, an amputee, one of the people I'd only ever seen from the outside. Later that week, during a conversation with Marc, the Boston Marathon bombing survivor who lost his own leg 13 years ago and went on to found the Marc Network, a national support community for amputees, I said it out loud for the first time, half laughing, half in disbelief. I guess I'm one of them now. I'd never imagined in my 64 years of life that I'd belong to a community that grows by more than 500 people a day in this country, each of us learning in our own way how to live again. That realization hit like gravity. My life had changed completely, and there was no going back. Those first 12 days after surgery were a blur of new medications, phantom pain, and small humiliations. Falling when I tried to stand, my son catching me mid-collapse, staring at the bandages, pretending I was fine. The smell of antiseptic clung to everything. The hospital sheets rough against skin that felt like it should move. Peeing in a jug sitting on the table where they placed my food every day in the hospital room. I learned the weight of silence in the middle of the night when the machines paused between beeps, and it felt like the whole world was holding its breath. In the previous 8 months, as I had healed, unhealed, ate, slept, and barely existed in that chair my older daughters bought for me, another kind of wound began to surface. I'd been laid up since Christmas, first the throat, then the leg, then the foot that never quite recovered because I hadn't gone deep enough the first time. The medications dulled my mind, the bills piled up, no income rolled in, and my work, the art, the writing, the storytelling, fell silent. I wasn't myself anymore, not as a husband, not as a provider, not as a man. And that's when Rainey told me she wanted a divorce. Needless to say, I was and remain absolutely devastated. It was August by then, 8 months into this spiral. The body can only lose so much before the heart starts giving up too. Her words hit harder and cut deeper than the scalpel ever did. In a single breath, 20 years of marriage became the other amputation. This one without anesthesia. But I need to be clear about something. Rainey didn't just walk away when all this began. She stayed. Through the sleepless nights, the many hospital runs, the wound care, much of which she took on herself on the days the in-home nurse was not scheduled, the endless rounds of doctors, the pharmacy runs, the waiting on me during times I could not wait on myself. Whatever had started breaking for her between us had begun long before this chapter. But my months of existing in the chair without really existing, the loss of health, mental acuity, income, and intimacy took its toll on her and hammered in the final nails. But even in her decision, she's shown nothing but compassion. With papers filed and the requisite emotional distancing that is the wicked stepsister to pending dissolution, we remain in the same home, parenting our 3 kids, waiting through the mandatory 120-day moratorium before we stand before the judge. Meanwhile, she still checks on me throughout the day, still caretakes me, still drives me to appointments, still makes sure I'm all right. Sometimes when I can't reach to adjust the straps on the pre-prosthetic stump protector, she kneels and fixes it for me, quietly, efficiency, without reservation, joking with me as we've always done. We don't talk much about love these days, but she keeps showing it in these small, steadfast ways. Love doesn't always look like it used to, but it's still here despite the looming end, which I hold hope will never happen. This book begins there, between breath and disbelief. It isn't only about losing a leg, it's about losing my heart, losing the map of who I was, and learning how to draw a new one with what's left. One night, through the haze of pain, heartache, crushed confidence, and despair, a biblical story surfaced from somewhere deep in my memory. Joseph, in the book of Genesis, betrayed and sold into slavery by his brothers, stood before them years later as the Grand Vizier of Egypt. 20 years had passed since the evil acts they committed against him. They did not recognize him, as they thought him long dead, but Joseph recognized them. After a series of events, Joseph finally revealed his identity to his brothers, who immediately fell into fear of some vengeful retribution. But Joseph assured them by saying, "You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good." Those words weren't about anyone else. They were about me, about finding purpose in pain, about believing that somehow this breaking might yet become a blessing. I wasn't ready to believe it yet, but I wanted to. Maybe this story isn't just mine. Maybe it's for anyone who's lost something that once defined them. People learning to move through the world again with half of what they started with and twice the need for grace. These are my first 12 days of learning how to breathe again, how to stand again, how to live with what's been taken, and to find out what still remains. I'm going to go into chapter 1 now, and then we'll read a couple more chapters and we'll call it for this recording for you, Mark. Chapter 1, Christmas Night. It didn't start with hospitals or ventilators or words like amputation. It started with Christmas. Not a grand one, not the kind with a tree smothered in presents or a roaring fire and champagne, just a modest Christmas, the kind you make work when the year's been lean and the bills have been loud. December had been slow. Project work dried up as clients closed their books for the year, and every check that came in vanished as soon as it arrived. Mortgage, electricity, groceries, gas. We didn't carry much debt, but there were always gaps, always something that needed patching. My older kids from a previous marriage, the twins, Abigail and Bryn, and my son Sam, stepped in the way they often do. Abby and Bryn, now 33, have built a remarkably successful company called Finfolk Productions. They make mermaid tails. Yes, actual, wearable mermaid tails. And they've turned it into a thriving business now in its 16th year. Of all of us, they're probably the most financially stable, and every so often they swoop in and quietly make things easier. Last Christmas was one of those times. They brought gifts for the younger kids, from them of course, but also from the heart, and filled the empty space under the tree with color and surprise. It's something they've done more than once, and it never fails to lift the whole house. I used to joke half serious, we don't look impoverished, but we sure feel it some days. And that was the truth of it. The numbers never quite added up. Every dollar had a job before it hit the bank, and there was rarely anything left for the kind of life we used to dream about. Not date nights, not trips, not even a night out that didn't involve counting the cost twice. That's the freelance life, feast or famine. I'd been an illustrator for nearly 40 years, and somehow it still felt like gambling. Some months the table's hot, and others you're just sitting there watching your chips disappear. Rainey, ever the practical one, was trying to help me stretch beyond that old rhythm. "You've got too much talent to keep scraping by," she'd say, not unkindly. About a year and a half earlier, she'd suggested tattooing. "You've been putting art on paper your whole life," she told me. "You could make a good living putting it on skin." I didn't scoff at the idea. I just had reservations. As an illustrator, I was used to paper, canvas, things that could be erased or painted over if I didn't like them. With skin, there's no undo button. You can't crumple it up and start again. That permanence was daunting. Tattooing isn't just drawing, it's surgery with ink. Every line matters. My hesitation wasn't about doing it, it was about doing it right. I had to learn a whole new way of thinking about pressure, pigment, and correction. How to make something last on living skin and still feel alive. Rainey kept encouraging me. She bought me a whole kit for tattooing. Sometimes gently, she encouraged me. Sometimes with a little more push. "You can do this," she'd say. "You've already got the talent. Just keep practicing." When I got caught up in other projects and let it slide, she'd circle back, reminding me, "Hey, pick up that tattoo gun again. You could set yourself up for something steady, something that lasts." Sometimes her persistence stung. Other times it saved me. That's marriage. One person holding up the mirror, even when you're not sure you want to see what's in it. Rainey was a planner. I was an improviser. She thought ahead, bought small things throughout the year, tucked them away for Christmas, so when December came, there were still gifts under the tree. They weren't extravagant, but they were thoughtful. That was her magic, finding enough when there wasn't enough. That Christmas Day, the house felt full. Even the bank account didn't agree with it. Sam came by with his girlfriend and a bottle of Glenmorangie. He always brought scotch, a different kind of every visit. We stood outside in the cold, smoking and talking about everything and nothing. Sam poured 2 shots into our glasses. Never straight from the bottle. We had too much respect for that. And we toasted quietly, father and son. The stars were sharp against the black winter sky, and the air smelled of smoke and snow. For a while, everything felt steady, ordinary. We didn't know it yet, but that was the last normal night of our lives. By evening, I wasn't feeling great, just off like a cold coming on. I told Rainey I was going to sleep on the couch so I wouldn't keep her awake, coughing. She thought I was just being considerate. I don't remember any of it. Later, she told me that sometime after midnight I called out for her. She came into the living room and saw me struggling to breathe. Shallow, erratic gasps. She didn't hesitate. She woke Flynn, our 15-year-old, and said, "We're taking your dad to the ER now." Together, they got me into the car and drove through the frozen dark. At the hospital, they checked me, said it might be the flu, and sent me home. I have no memory of that either. Back home, I settled on the couch again, trying to rest. But by the early morning hours, things got worse. Rainey told me later that my breathing became uneven, my skin pale. She shook Flynn awake again. They loaded me back into the car, same road, same cold, only this time it was more urgent. That second trip is the one that saved my life, though. I didn't know it then. Rainey told me later that when we got to the hospital that second time, I could barely stay conscious. The triage nurse saw me, waved us straight past the waiting room. My oxygen levels were already tanking. I remember none of it, not the ride, not the doors, not the faces leaning over me. The rest I've pieced together from what Rainey and Flynn told me. She said the ER was lit like an overexposed photograph, all fluorescence and noise. Monitors beeping, nurses calling codes, the kinds of chaos that feels both clinical and desperate. They clipped a sensor onto my finger, one of those little plastic clamps that reads oxygen and pulse. It glowed red against my skin. Rainey said she watched the monitor drop to 50%. Normally I'm at 99 with those. 50 is the edge of the map. A doctor barked orders, someone mentioned a ventilator, and then I was gone. I have no memory of being intubated, no memory of the moment they slid the tube down my throat and connected me to a machine to breathe for me. Rainey told me later that they sedated me, what the doctors called a medically induced coma. It's not the kind of coma you see in the movies. It's something deliberate, controlled. They do it to keep you calm and still while the ventilator takes over. For me, it was like the film of my life just cut to black. No white light, no tunnel, no grand vision, just nothing. When I came back, it was morning. The first thing I remember is light, cold, sterile light spilling down from above, reflecting off polished floors and stainless steel. My throat felt shredded. My chest hurt like I'd been punched from the inside. I tried to speak and nothing came out but a whisper. There was a nurse nearby writing something on a chart. I tried to get her attention, but no sound came. She just smiled faintly, nodded, and said, "You're okay, Mr. Roberts. You're breathing on your own now." And then the door opened. I turned my head, slow, heavy, and there was Sam, my older son, just 23 at that time, standing in the doorway with a book in his hand, The Lord of the Rings. He looked uncertain, cautious, maybe like he wasn't sure if I could hear him. "Hey, Dad," he said softly, sounding just like me, as much as he looks just like me. "Sam," I rasped, surprised by how broken my own voice sounded. He smiled, that gentle half-smile he's had since he was little. "I thought I'd come and read to you," he said. He pulled a chair next to the bed, opened the book, and started to read from the Fellowship of the Ring. His voice was steady, familiar, the sound of home. I drifted in and out, catching fragments, hobbits, mountains, Gandalf's laughter. Somewhere between waking and sleep, I remember thinking how strange it was, my son reading about journeys and fellowship while I was lying there still trying to understand my own. At the time, I didn't know that what began as a night of not breathing would turn into months of fighting to breathe again. I couldn't see the surgeries ahead, the scar tissue, the endless appointments, or the chain of events that would eventually lead to the loss of my leg. All of that was still hidden beyond the horizon. For now, I was just a man alive, listening to his son read, faintly aware that something larger had begun, though I didn't yet know its name. Chapter 4, The River of Scars. When I woke in the morning after surgery, the first thing I saw was Dr. Gary Rosenthal, standing in the doorway of my hospital room. His scrubs were wrinkled, his hair tousled, his eyes rimmed with fatigue. It was 6:20 a.m., and he'd been on his feet all night long, 8 hours straight, pulling blood clots out of my leg like a man digging for his own life. He gave me a tired smile. "Well," he said, "we've saved the leg." I sat up a little, my throat dry. "So tell me, Doc," I said, trying to sound like my old self, "am I keeping this thing or not, or am I losing it?" He looked at me over his glasses, then slid them off and rubbed his eyes. "Right now, you've got no pulse from about 6 inches above the ankle down through your toes. If that pulse doesn't come back in the next 2 days, we can't save it." I nodded, calm on the outside, chaos underneath. "Arr, then," I said in my best pirate voice. "If it comes off, you'll have to just get me the best peg leg money can buy. Avast!" He chuckled, shaking his head. "I like your attitude." I said, "That's for my kids," I said, "and my wife. Gotta keep a good front, right?" He gave me a look that said he understood too well. then left me to rest. Truth is, I wasn't as brave as I sounded. That was pure, controlled bravado, the kind of humor you build like armor when you're terrified. The next 48 hours were a strange kind of purgatory. Every few hours, someone from Rosenthal's team came in with a Doppler wand, pressing the little pen-sized instrument against my foot. Nothing, just static. I stared at the ceiling, counting seconds by the beeps of the monitor. It's an odd feeling, waiting for a sound you've never really thought about before. A pulse, your own pulse, coming from a place that suddenly feels foreign. I had hundreds of people praying for me. Friends, family, radio listeners, even strangers online. And I'll be honest, I wasn't sure what to do with that. I've told people I'd pray for them before, and I meant it, but I always did it in the way that I told myself prayer works best. When someone crosses your mind, you speak their name to God, and that's that. The Bible says, where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, there am I in the midst of them. But I wasn't sure anymore how much that mattered. I had drifted from my faith a long time ago. Once upon a time, I'd studied theology in college, worked in youth ministry, even considered the pulpit. But over the decades, church politics and hypocrisy eroded my trust. I didn't throw the baby out with the bathwater, but I did start questioning whether the bathwater had ever really been holy. I'd said it on my radio show many times. I believe prayer connects us to one another, but I'm not sure it changes God's mind. If anything, it changes ours. This, of course, flew in the face of my seminary training, but it is where I had drifted over the 20 years that had passed since that time in school. That's where I was when the prayers started pouring in, skeptical, half grateful, half unmoved. But then 2 calls broke through the noise. The first was from an old friend, a movie producer, and by his own proud admission, a dyed-in-the-wool atheist. He left me a voicemail while I was in and out of painkillers. "Scotty," his voice said, "you've been a huge influence on me over the years, and I just want you to know, your friend, the atheist, dropped to his knees and prayed to a God I don't believe exists, asking him to heal your leg. I don't know what that means, but I figured you'd want to know about it." The voicemail stopped. That voicemail stopped me cold. Then came another call from Dan, an old high school friend. We hadn't talked much in years. He said, "Mind if I pray for you right now?" "Go for it," I told him. He prayed simply, "God, I ask that you heal Scotty's leg, but more than that, give Dr. Rosenthal a surprise." That was it. Short, unpolished, genuine. When I hung up, I smiled and thought, wouldn't that be something? Not long after that call with Dan, 2 others reached out to me, both women who had no connection to each other and no reason to know that what was happening in my hospital room. The first was Terry, the woman I'd been working with on the Ancient Heroes trading card project. We've known each other close to 40 years. She left me a voicemail that began with an apology. "Scott, this is really uncomfortable for me. I don't usually have things like this happen to me. Ever." She said she'd been reading in the book of Zechariah, the opening verses where God says, "Come back to me, and I will return to you." The words, she said, wouldn't let her go. Then, as clearly as if someone had spoken aloud, my name came to her mind. "God told me to call you," she said, "and to tell you he wants you to come back." The second message came from an old friend from one of the churches I attended decades ago. We'd only traded a few notes over the years, but that week she began sending texts that were hard to make sense of, half sentences, fragments, something urgent trying to get through. Finally, she called. Her voice trembled as she said she'd been praying and believed she'd received a word about me. Come back to God. He's calling you back. Two voices, unaware of each other, speaking the same message within hours of one another. At the time, I didn't know what to make of it, but when I saw what I saw later, the man sitting beside my bed saying, I'm right here, I've never left, their words found their echo. 2 days later at dawn, Rosenthal came back into my room in his scrubs, holding that same Doppler wand. He pressed it into my foot, static. Then suddenly, whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. He pulled the wand away and blinked, surprised. Do you know what that is? I grinned. Doc, my wife's had 3 kids. I've heard heartbeats on Dopplers before. That's mine. He looked back down at the wand, almost laughing. I'm shocked, he said. I'm surprised. I pointed a finger at him and said, I knew you'd say that. He gave a half smile, shaking his head. I don't know how this happened, but you've got a pulse. I didn't tell him about Dan's prayer just yet. I just lay there listening to that rhythmic whoosh, the sound of grace, disguised as circulation. A few days later, I was sitting in my hospital bed, watching the news, half listening to the world go on outside my room. I wasn't sedated, just bone-tired. The sterile air smelled faintly of oatmeal and antiseptic. Then out of nowhere, the light in the corner brightened. Not blinding, just clear, like sunlight caught in still water. A man was sitting in the chair beside my bed. Middle-aged, calm, salt and pepper hair at the temples. He wore a ribbed zip-up sweater, half open at the neck, a shirt beneath it, neat and orderly. No halo, no thunder, no Zeus beard, just presence. He looked at me, tapped his chest once, then gestured toward me. His voice was quiet, steady, unmistakable. Scotty, I'm right here. I've never left. He paused, then added, Your leg? Pff, I could heal it, erase every scar if I wanted. But that's not why I'm here. I'm here for your heart, not your leg. Come back to me. I blinked and the chair was empty again. The TV still murmured, the monitors still beeped, but something in the room and in me had changed. Now, I want to be clear about something. I'm not that guy. I don't see the face of Jesus in my cornflakes and call it a miracle. I'm not someone who gets visions or hears heavenly choirs. I'm a pragmatic, down-to-earth man. Despite all my years in ministry and theological training, I rely on critical thinking, intelligence, wit, and humor to make sense of the world. So for me, to have a vision like this, awake, alert, sober-minded, was completely outside my realm of normal acceptability. It wasn't some morphine dream or spiritual delusion. It was real. I know some people will say, well, you were on a hospital drug, Scotty. Of course you saw something. And maybe that's what they need to believe. I get it. I might have said the same thing once, but I know what I saw. I know what I heard. Not everybody gets a vision. Maybe most people don't need one. But I think God gave me this moment to tell me my story isn't done, that I still have something I'm meant to do. He wasn't showing off a miracle. He was pointing me toward purpose. For years, I drifted far from my faith and doubted the power of prayer. I talked about it on my radio shows, reasoned it down to fellowship and comfort. I still believe fellowship matters. But that day, I learned that sometimes God answers with presence, not proof. He didn't fix my leg. He reminded me he'd never walked away. The peace that settled in over the next 2 weeks was unlike anything I'd known. Not the peace of being okay, but the deep, slow current of knowing I wasn't alone in any of this. My faith didn't come back polished or doctrinal. It came back breathing. Chapter 6. The day the leg came off. The end didn't start with the surgery. It started in a haze. By July, I was drowning in pills, antibiotics, painkillers, blood thinners, nerve meds, all mixing together into a cocktail that made me feel half stoned, half drunk, and entirely out of body. Some days it was almost comedic. Some days it wasn't funny at all. There was one afternoon when a buddy came by to visit. We sat in the lawn chairs out front, soaking up the sun like retirees. I'd bought a 6-pack of Guinness, or rather Rainey had bought it for me, but I couldn't drink any of it. The meds made alcohol a bad idea. So I sat there with my water while he drank for both of us, and we laughed until my stitches ached. I couldn't walk straight. I couldn't even stand without someone helping me. I was the tipsy sober man, drugged out of my mind and watching someone else enjoy my beer. I laughed all afternoon. I was goofy as hell. After that, I told my doctor I needed some help. Something's not right, I said. These meds are knocking me on my ass. He agreed to have infectious diseases review the prescriptions to see what was fighting what. We set the appointment for Thursday. Rainey drove me in, and by the time we got there, my foot was still bleeding, weeks after the last surgery of cutting off my toes, and she said the smell was getting bad. When they unwrapped it, I saw what she meant, the room filled with the sour, metallic stench of rot, old blood, flesh, and dirty socks. I apologized and cracked a joke about spraying some foot deodorant on it. The doctor looked at me horrified. "Don't do that!" "I'm kidding," I said. Nobody laughed. Then the laughter stopped altogether when they saw the wound. The doctor's tone went from curious to clinical. "You need to see vascular surgery right now." They didn't mean next week. They meant now. Because of the insurance tangle, I couldn't go directly back to Dr. Rosenthal at Regents Hospital, but they found a loophole. If I went in through the ER, it would count as an emergency case. So Rainey and I drove across the street to St. Paul, checked into Regent's emergency room, and sat in the waiting area for 3 hours. She stayed with me the whole time, coffee in hand, her other hand on my knee. We were quiet. There wasn't much left to say. When they finally brought me back, a new vascular surgeon introduced himself, Dr. Barbato, an associate of Dr. Gary Rosenthal's. He said Rosenthal was out of town but had been briefed on my case. "I know your story pretty well," he said. "Gary and I have talked about you before. We'll take care of you." Then he looked back at my foot, studied the color, the swelling, the seepage, and said the words I already knew were coming. "That leg's got to come off." I looked at him, took a long breath, and again, invoking my very best Captain Barbossa voice from Pirates of the Caribbean, "Well then, looks like we'll be getting me peg leg after all." It broke the tension clean in half. The doctors laughed, the nurses laughed, even Rainey laughed. It was a small, absurd victory, a moment of gallows humor that reminded everyone in the room that the man under the bandages was still very much alive. They tried to fit me into surgery Friday, no room. Then Saturday, still no room. By Sunday morning, I'd been in the hospital now 3 days, long enough to memorize the news cycle, the sound of the food cart's wheels, the rhythm of nurses changing shifts. I wouldn't wear the hospital gown. I hate them. Those flimsy, open-back things that make you feel half naked and wholly ridiculous. I would tell the nurses, "Yeah, I'll put that on, but you're going to have to look at my buttocks." They offered hospital shorts I said, no thanks, I'll stick with my own clothes. So I sat there for 2 days in my cargo shorts and t-shirt, my civilian uniform as I called it, watching Fox News and eating surprisingly good hospital food. Regions has one of the best kitchens of any hospital I've ever been in, and I've been in a few these days. Rainey stayed as much as she could. She had the kids to manage, work to handle, life to keep moving. When they told me surgery would be Sunday morning at 7:30, I told her to go home, get some sleep. I said, I'll call you when I wake up. We laughed, but it was the nervous kind. She kissed me goodbye, squeezed my hand, and left with that brave smile I'd come to love and dread all at once. Sunday morning they rolled me toward the OR. The corridor lights passed overhead like a film reel, white, 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 and gone. I remember the Sharpie marks first. The surgeon's assistant drew a thick black line just below my knee, right where they'd made the cut. We mark it while you're awake, she said, so you can be sure we're taking the right leg. And I said, you mean the left leg? And she looked at me, almost answering that, and went, I see what you did there. Good plan, I said. The doctor didn't laugh. Then the anesthesia mask came down. Count backward from 10, someone said. I think I made it to 7 or 8. When I opened my eyes, the world was different. The first thing I noticed wasn't pain. It was absence. There was less of me. The sheet lay flat where my leg used to be. Relief didn't come. Emptiness did. And yet under it all, a strange peace. Not comfort, not acceptance, just stillness. Then I realized what was missing. For the first time in all these months of surgeries and procedures, Rainey wasn't there. The nurse leaned close, her voice soft. You did fine, Mr. Roberts. It's over. You're good. You're waking up now. I started to cry. It was almost guttural. Not from pain, but from sudden, gut-deep awareness that the one person who had carried me through all of this, even though the unraveling of everything we used to be, wasn't beside me. Where's my wife? I shouted. It wasn't a question, it was a plea, deeply embedded in my fading anesthesia. Where's Rainey? Where's my wife? The nurses moved quickly, trying to calm me. She's here, one said. She's in the waiting area. We just couldn't have her back during recovery. We'll go get her. I shook my head, tears running down into my ears. Please go find her. I've never woken up from anything like this without her being right here with me. One of them touched my arm. We'll get her now. I must have repeated it 6 times. Where's Rainey? Where's my wife? Until the door finally opened and there she was, walking in, eyes a little red but steady, wearing that small, quiet smile that told me everything without a word. I'm right here. She came to my side and took my hand, careful not to disturb the wires and IV lines that ran out of me. Her thumb pressed against my palm. I exhaled long and heavy, the kind of sigh that empties everything out of you. Here she is. She's here. She's still here. And just like that, I could breathe again. I wasn't whole, but I wasn't alone. That morning I learned that love isn't always soft or easy or even certain. Sometimes it isn't the promise that holds you. It's the presence. Rainey and I were already living inside a storm neither of us knew how to calm, but there she was. She still came, still reached for my hand. And in that space between anesthesia and awakening, I understood something that I'd forgotten all along the way. That grace isn't a thing you deserve. It's the thing that arrives anyway, when the world thinks you've lost too much to feel it. That was the morning I lost my leg. But it wasn't the morning I lost hope. Chapter 8. Phantoms. Start that again because I snuffed. Chapter 8. Phantoms. Phantom pain is strange. The body remembers what's gone. It sends signals to something that no longer exists. I feel my foot that isn't there anymore. The toes curling, the itch I can't scratch, the ache I can't reach. It's as if the nerves haven't yet gotten the memo that the territory is gone. Sometimes it's a throb, sometimes a flicker of heat or pressure, and sometimes it's so real I look down expecting to see my leg exactly where it used to be. It's a little unnerving, but also deeply human. The body remembers. And so does the heart. There's another kind of phantom pain, not in the limb, but in the space between two people who once fit perfectly together. The kind that wakes you at night, reaching across the bed for someone who's still there but already fading away. Rainey sleeps in the bedroom now. I sleep out here in the chair. We still talk every day. She still drives me to appointments, still checks on my dressings, still brings me coffee in the mornings. But there's a quiet in her now, the kind of quiet that hums with distance. We share jokes sometimes. She'll pass by and say something funny or ironic, and I'll smile, but our laughter feels like it's echoing from another time. She never says she loves me anymore. I reached for her hand tonight and kissed it as she walked by. She let me, but didn't say anything, just kept moving. And I can't even fault her for that. She's been carrying the weight of this life for so long. At the very beginning, when she handed me her letter asking for a divorce, she said that she needed to find someone who can take care of her when she gets older, as I'm 19 years older than she is. It's hard to argue with that feeling, but the years between us are the same number of years that were there 20 years ago when we first started dating and got married. And love is supposed to help you weather the storms, especially after 2 decades. The rest is just the stuff that couples experience every day and choose every day to love their way through, outside influences notwithstanding. Earlier this evening, we were outside having a cigarette. She started talking about the new 3I Atlas comet that's been in the news. She'd read about it and watched videos on how scientists think it might carry signs of extraterrestrial life. She was animated, curious the way she used to get when a mystery caught her imagination. For an hour we were just us again, talking about space, the unknown, and the wild, impossible beauty of things we will never fully understand. When we went back inside, she sent me a few videos about it, and we watched together for a while. Then she went to bed. I stayed in my chair, staring at the dark screen after she turned off the TV, and thought about how those conversations used to mean everything. We always shared that fascination with the unseen. Ghosts, psychic energy, tarot, the paranormal, ancient mysteries, the spaces between worlds. She's intuitive. She always has been. Almost psychic in her ability to sense what's coming. She's warned me about people before. She sees storms before they hit. But now I wonder what her intuition tells her about us. About what's ending and what could still be reborn. She told me once that maybe we'd been drifting for a couple of years before all this had happened. That she'd dropped hints I never picked up on. And maybe she's right. Maybe I missed them. Too busy working, too distracted by the day-to-day scramble of bills and projects and survival. She said the sickness in the leg just made it worse. That it killed whatever was left. And yet, she's still here. Still caring for me. Still driving me to appointments and changing my bandages and making me coffee. So maybe love doesn't vanish overnight. Maybe it just lingers like a phantom limb, invisible but still aching. The ghost of what we were still haunts this house, the way she moves through the kitchen, the sound of her bare feet on the wood floor, the coffee mug she sets by my chair. All of it feels like the torch of something that's no longer alive, but refuses to die. I sometimes wonder if phantom love is just as real as phantom pain, a trick of memory or proof that some things remain connected even when they're severed. And then, of course, there are the children. They're living with their own phantoms now, watching their parents drift apart, watching their father learn to live with one leg. They each handle it differently. Flynn, my 16-year-old son, is quiet and reserved. When he talks to me, he doesn't sit. He stands in the doorway, hands in his pockets, voice low. I'll ask, "Did you want to talk about something?" And he'll answer with a simple, "Yeah," or "No." He carries things inside. He's solid, thoughtful, and maybe a little lost in all of this, trying to be strong without knowing what that means yet. He's also heartbreakingly sensitive beneath that armor. Over the last 2 years, he taught himself electric guitar. Just picked it up and learned. He's become damn good, too. His girlfriend, Paige, loved his music. She'd listen to him play and tell him how beautiful it was, and for a year they were nearly inseparable. Last week, he came to me in that same quiet way and said, "Dad, Paige broke up with me." I asked why, and he told me her parents said her grades were slipping and they wanted her to focus on school. But he still sees her at school, laughing with her other friends, and he doesn't understand why they get to stay and he doesn't. He stood there in front of me trying to hold it together, and then the tears came. He doesn't cry often. When puberty hit, the bubbly open kid who used to bounce around the house turned into this deep monosyllabic young man, all quiet storms and long silences. But that night his walls cracked. He cried. And I knew that behind the teenage heartbreak, he was seeing something larger. His parents splitting apart, love breaking down without warning. He didn't say it outright, but I could tell what he was thinking. So, this is how it happens. One person changes their mind, and the other one just bleeds out quietly. I told him, "Flynn, I know it hurts. I know it doesn't make sense. But this is part of how you learn who you are in love. How you learn what it costs and what it gives back." He nodded, tears still streaking his cheeks. And as he stood there, I felt the ache of what I couldn't do. I couldn't jump to my feet, cross the room like before. I couldn't wrap him up in that strong fatherly embrace he used to fall into when he was small. So I simply said softly, "Flynn, come over here." He thought I was going to stand, but I just shifted forward in my wheelchair, opened my arms and said, "Come here." And when he did, I held him. He cried into my shoulder, and I held on as tight as I could for a long time. Neither of us said anything. We just breathed in the same rhythm, a father and son, both missing something that used to be whole. He's standing in the same emotional rubble I am, just scaled to 16. Ellery is my 10-year-old. She's quite the opposite. She's sunshine in sneakers, our little cheerleader, literally always bouncing, always smiling, always in motion. She can fill a room with light, but she's also at war with her sister most days. "You're wearing my shirt. Give me my shoes. Stay out of my room." The kind of sibling chaos that feels normal, except when you remember what's swirling beneath it all. She's young enough that she still sees me as a hero, but old enough to know something's wrong. She asked me once, "Does your pretend foot hurt?" meaning my phantom foot. And I laughed. Sometimes, baby. Then she looked at me for a long time as if trying to solve a puzzle the adult in the room could not. Rowan, our 13-year-old, is a storm all her own. Fierce, brilliant, headstrong, and heartbreakingly beautiful. She looks just like her mother. Sometimes I'll catch her out of the corner of my eye and think it's Rainey walking into the room. She's the one who's been fighting the hardest since my first surgery. Somewhere between then and now, something inside her cracked open. Grief, maybe, or anger, she can't name. She started pushing every boundary she could find, talking back to teachers, ignoring rules, slamming doors, breaking curfews. The police have been to our house more times than I cared to count. Court dates, social workers, an ankle bracelet. She's been on juvenile supervision for a while now. She's not a bad kid. She's a storm. And storms, I've learned, are just weather looking for a place to break. Rowan tells me sometimes that she hates me, that I never loved her, that I should just go to hell. And then a day or two later, she'll send me a text message that says, Dad, when you have to move and get your own place, can I come live with you? That's the heart of her, the swing between fury and love, rejection and longing. She's a 13-year-old girl caught between the loss of her father's leg and the slow unraveling of her parents' marriage, trying to control something, anything, when everything feels like it's falling apart. I don't know how much of a rebellion is truly anger at me, how much is fear that I might die, or how much is just the wild, raw ache of being 13. Maybe all of the above. Maybe she's the living mirror of every phantom in this house, of every part of us that doesn't know how to heal yet. And so there are many ghosts here. The missing leg, the love that's fading, the children watching it all and trying to grow up inside the echoes. I used to talk about faith on the air all the time. 5 nights a week, live radio, exploring the unknown, the spiritual, the strange. I'd question it, challenge it, poke at it with humor and intellect. Now, sitting in the quiet of this house, faith feels less like a broadcast and more like a whisper. There are days it feels like I'm still trying to believe in the things I used to say into that microphone, that there's purpose, that pain is a teacher, that we can rise again. But sometimes faith is just waking up and deciding to breathe, to roll the wheelchair toward the light of the window, to keep trying. Maybe that's what it means now, to live with the phantoms and not let them define the rest of the story. Then I have the little semi-poetic interlude after this, the marriage that stayed behind. They tell me phantom pain is the body remembering what it's lost. Maybe heartbreak is the same thing. Rainey still brings me coffee in the morning, black with a little sweetness, just the way I've always liked it. She still checks my meds, reminds me when the next antibiotic is due. She still laughs at my one-liners, even when she's tired, and cracks many of her own. But the laughter fades faster now, and the space between us fills with quiet. She's still here, still in the same house, but it's a different kind of presence, the kind that hovers at the edge of goodbye. She's the caregiver, but then there's the ghost. It's a strange duality to be cared for by somebody who no longer sees a shared future. To feel her hand on my shoulder, steady and practiced, while knowing that those same hands are learning to let go. She's kind, always has been, but kindness is a hard thing to stand beneath when you still love the person offering it. I find myself grateful and gutted all at once. She folds my blankets, empties my coffee cup, takes care of the bills, runs the errands, and I know what it costs her. Not just time, but heart. because she's already told me she wants a different kind of life, freedom, fresh air, space to become whoever she is without the weight of all that's been. She says there were signs for years that I missed, clues left out like breadcrumbs I never followed. And maybe she's right. Maybe I was too lost in my own storms, my own small triumphs, my work, my children, my stubborn hope that love, once promised, was self-sustaining. But now standing here on one leg, I can see the trail of missed signals stretching behind us. And it breaks me, not because of guilt alone, but because she once believed in me enough to leave those signs at all. Then there's the rewriting. To leave cleanly, I think she's had to rewrite some of our story. We all do it, don't we? When we walk away from something that defined us, we emphasize the pain more than the joy. It's the only way we can convince ourselves it's survivable. I see it in the small ways she talks about us. In the past tense, in her telling, I've become the architect of every wrong, the reason for every ache. Maybe that's the way it has to be. Maybe it's easier for her to bury the good alongside the bad, so it doesn't call out to her at night. I don't argue, not anymore. I used to defend myself, point out the other side of the coin, try to rebuild something with words, but words can't resurrect what someone has already decided to leave behind. So I listen. I nod. And later, when she's gone to bed, I whisper the rest of the story to the empty air. The story where we both are trying our best, where love existed in the spaces between all our mistakes. But the conversations hurt in new ways. The strangest part isn't the anger, it's the civility. It's how we can sit outside in the evenings smoking together like we used to in the early days, and she'll ask with casual curiosity, Have any women shown interest in you yet? Now keep in mind, we're only 3 months into this. And I try to match her tone. I tell her, yeah, there's been people reach out. And yes, there has been interest, but every time I say it, it feels like lying through my teeth because there's only one person I want reaching out, and she's sitting right in front of me. It's a strange new form of pain to still love the person who's divorcing you, to share smokes, jokes, and inside references with the same woman who no longer wants to share a bed with you. But I can't make her wrong for it. I don't want to. I think she's been holding up more than her share of the world for a long time. She's raised the kids, worked the job, carried the bills, and cared for the man she says she can't love the same way anymore. I keep thinking if she could just see me through the old lens again, if she could just remember who we were before all of this, maybe something would shift. But maybe she's remembering me all too well, and that's the problem. There's this notion people have about marriage that if it breaks, someone must have broken it. But sometimes it just erodes, quietly like water wearing down a stone. You don't see the change until it's done. And still, she's here. Still standing in the same house as me, still part of the story, even as she tries to step out of it. Our kids feel it, of course. They live in fault lines. Flynn's gone a bit quiet. He carries his heartbreak like I do, inward, private, masked behind his teenage stoicism. His first real girlfriend just broke his heart, and I see the parallel in his eyes. The same question. How does love just stop? Rowan, fiery and defiant, wears her pain on the outside. She lashes out, challenges everything. Maybe it's easier to fight than to feel. Ellery still laughs, still dances through the living room with her wild energy, but even she asks, "Are you and Mom still friends?" And I tell her yes, because it's the closest thing to true that I can offer. I think our children have become completely desensitized to divorce. A so-called broken family is now the norm amongst their friends and on all the social media shows and contacts they encounter. None of them has really expressed what they think about Dad losing a leg. But they also watched me decline in that chair for the last 8 months. Rainie's frustration with having to take on all the work around the home was no doubt so much on public display here in the house that the kids may have already been distancing themselves from what they saw, or were led to understand was a permanent break coming between their parents. I think Rainie and I both tried to shield them, but you can't hide heartbreak from your own children. They feel the temperature drop even when you don't speak of winter. But sometimes these children know far too much. They're used as sounding boards and confidants to Rainie's pain and anger, elevated to the status of equals in the divorce gossip, leaving them even more confused as opposed to shielded. After the amputation, when I woke from anesthesia and didn't see her, I panicked. I shouted for her, loud enough that the nurses came running. "Where's my wife? Where's my wife?" When she finally came through the curtain, she was smiling, not a light-hearted smile, but the one she used to give me when the world was uncertain and we both needed to believe it would be okay. She came over, took my hand, and whispered, "I'm right here." And in that moment, the world steadied. That's the Rainie I hold in my mind even now. That's the image I'll keep. The one where she's still my wife, still strong, still independent, still the anchor at the edge of the storm. As I mentioned, Rainie has always been intuitive, psychic in her way. She feels things before they happen, senses people's motives before they speak. She's warned me about people who would later betray me. She's guided me toward choices that changed our lives for the better. We still share that language of wonder, the paranormal, the mysteries, the cosmos. Just last night, she talked about the new comet again, 3I Atlas, and how it might hint at extraterrestrial life. She was bright-eyed, animated, alive with curiosity, and for an hour it felt like old times, the two of us digging into the unknown, laughing at theories, connecting through wonder instead of wounds. But when the conversation ended, so did the warmth. She went to bed, and I stayed awake, staring at the screen, wondering if maybe that's who we really were. Two explorers who could find the stars together, but not the ground beneath our own feet. It was a phantom marriage. Some nights, when the house settles and the kids are asleep, I swear I can still feel the weight of her next to me. Not literally. I haven't shared that bed in months. But in memory, in the ghost of warmth that lingers on the other side of the couch when she gets up. The phantom limb of the marriage aches just like the leg. The same signals fire. You're missing something that used to be part of you. The brain doesn't care whether it's flesh or love. Loss feels the same. People ask if I'm angry. I'm not. I'm gutted, bewildered, sometimes even numb, but not angry, because even in leaving, she's shown me grace. She could have abandoned me completely, but she didn't. She's stayed, at least until I can stand, and that counts for something sacred. Maybe one day, when the legal words are inked and the signature's dry, she'll finally leave this house for good. But she'll never leave this story. There's too much of her woven into every chapter. The measure of love that remains, I don't know if love ever really ends. I think it changes shape, sometimes into care, sometimes into silence, sometimes into a memory you visit when the night is too long. She told me once she hopes the kids will be happy again after the divorce. I wanted to tell her they already had been happy prior to all the chaos of health issues and divorce action. Most of the time, anyway. We were. Even in the hard days, we laughed, we tried. Maybe happiness isn't what you feel every day. Maybe it's what you remember after the storm passes. As for me, I still love her. Not in the desperate way of a man clinging to the past, but in the enduring way of a man who knows love doesn't vanish just because life rearranges it. I hope she finds peace, even if it's not with me. I don't really want that, if I'm being honest. The darker side of me, the wounded human part, wants her to feel the hole she left behind, to know what I've been walking through without her. That's the vengeful, shitty part of love, the part that hurts so much it starts wanting company. But beneath that is something quieter. I do wish her happy, just not elsewhere, not with someone else. I want her to rediscover that happiness here, where we built it once before. I want her to remember that love we made still has a pulse, faint maybe, but still beating. Maybe one day she will. Maybe she won't. But if love has any echo that lasts, I hope it carries that sound. The faint, stubborn rhythm that says we mattered. That man she once loved still lives here. He's just learning how to walk again, without the leg, without the marriage, but with the same stubborn heart. Epilogue. My wheelchair is a temporary throne for a man relearning balance. The compression sock grips my leg, shaping what's left into something that can bear weight again. The prosthetic isn't here yet, but the shadow already lives in my imagination. Every morning I wake up and run my hand along the bandaged edge, half expecting to feel the familiar shape that isn't there. It's strange how memory lingers in the flesh. My body still believes in its own completeness. Maybe that's what faith really is, the soul remembering wholeness even after loss. There are moments I still look for Rainey in the ways I used to, for her hand on my shoulder, her laughter cutting through the static of a long day. Sometimes when we sit outside at night and talk about the stars or about that green comet she showed me, I think of those prayers. My atheist friend on his knees, Dan asking God for a surprise. Maybe this is the surprise. Not the healing, not the leg, but that I'm still here, still breathing, still trying. Faith, I've learned, is not about rescue. It's about recognition, about realizing that even in the dark, there's something left inside that wants to live. The prayers didn't save me. They reminded me that I wasn't alone. I think of that moment before surgery when I told the doctor to take the leg if he had to, stop taking me piece by piece. That was a kind of surrender, not to despair, but to the truth that survival has its own anatomy. Muscle, scar, memory, hope. You rebuild it 1 inch at a time. If there's grace in any of this, it's not found in the miracles I've asked for, but in the endurance I never expected to have, in the friends who prayed, in the woman who stayed, even when she couldn't love me the same way anymore, in the children who still call me Dad. Maybe faith isn't what we think it is. Maybe it's the moments after pain, when you realize you're still capable of wonder. Maybe it's a man with one leg learning how to stand up again. That's what survival looks like now. Not triumphant, not holy, just alive. And grateful to be so. Then finally, the captain's log, the afterword. If you've sailed this far with me, through hospitals and hallways, through pain, prayer, and the strange comedy of survival, I owe you more than thanks. I owe you the truth that kept me afloat. None of us gets to chart our seas in calm weather alone. The leg is gone. The marriage is uncertain. The future is unwritten. But what I've learned in this year of undoing is that loss doesn't erase you, it redraws your map. It asks you whether you'll still steer toward light when the compass spins. People sometimes ask if I still believe in miracles. I do, but not the kind that come with trumpets. Miracles are smaller, quieter. They're the moment you stop cursing the tide and realize you're still breathing. They're your children's laughter from the next room. They're the woman who still drives you to the doctor even when her heart has driven elsewhere. They're the friend who prays even when he doesn't believe. So I'll keep writing and talking and sharing stories from this strange epic life. Not because I've reached the end, but because I'm still learning how to walk in every sense of the word. If you've lost something, a limb, a love, a direction, may these pages remind you you're not broken, you're becoming. And sometimes that's the holiest work of all.